Believe God for the impossible. Step out in faith. Have you ever stood at the edge of something that felt completely impossible? Maybe it was a dream so big that your logical mind immediately dismissed it. Maybe it was a healing you needed, a relationship you wanted to restore, or a change in circumstances that seemed beyond your control. And in those moments, have you noticed how your mind automatically reaches for all the reasons why it can't happen? That voice that says, be realistic. Don't get your hopes up. People like you don't get to have that. I want to talk with you today about what happens when you learn to see beyond that voice, when you step into a different way of being that allows the impossible to become not just possible, but inevitable. There's a passage from the Tao Te Ching that has stayed with me for decades. Lao Tzu wrote, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." Think about that for a moment. Not when I achieve more, not when I work harder, not when I prove myself worthy, but when I let go. When I release my grip on my limited self-concept, on my ideas about what's possible for someone like me, on my attachment to how things should unfold. In that surrender, in that letting go, infinite possibility opens up. But here's what's fascinating, and this is where modern psychology meets ancient wisdom. We're not actually letting go of who we truly are. We're letting go of who we think we are. We're releasing the prison of our own limited perception. I remember many years ago, I was working with a man, let's call him Robert, who came to one of my lectures. He pulled me aside afterward, and I could see the desperation in his eyes. He told me he'd been diagnosed with a condition that his doctor said was irreversible, progressive, degenerative, no known cure. He said, "Dr. Dyer, I've read all your books. I've tried to think positively. I've tried to manifest healing. But every morning I wake up and the symptoms are still there, and I feel like a failure because nothing is working." And I asked him a question that I want to ask you now. What if the problem isn't that healing isn't available to you, but that you're looking for it in the wrong place? You see, Robert was doing what most of us do when we encounter the impossible. He was trying to use his ego, his limited, fear-based self, to force the universe into compliance. He was white-knuckling his way toward healing, gripping so tightly to the outcome that there was no space for grace to enter. He was operating from a belief that he had to make it happen, that if he just thought hard enough, visualized perfectly enough, took the right actions, then maybe God or the universe or whatever power he believed in would reward his efforts with a miracle. But that's not how faith works. That's not how the impossible becomes possible. Real faith, the kind that moves mountains, the kind that dissolves tumors, the kind that transforms circumstances that medical science or financial logic or relationship counseling says are hopeless. Real faith is not about believing harder. It's about believing differently. It's about shifting from ego to source, from force to flow, from asking, how can I make this happen, to asking, how can I allow this to happen through me? Let me share something with you that might sound paradoxical. The moment you truly step out in faith is the moment you stop trying to control the outcome. When you step out in faith, you're not stepping toward a specific result. You're stepping into alignment with a power that knows more than you do, that sees possibilities your limited perception cannot even imagine. You're saying, I don't know how this will unfold, but I trust that there is an intelligence in this universe that is for me, not against me. Now, I can already hear some of you thinking, but Wayne, what about taking action? What about being proactive? Are you saying I should just sit around and wait for miracles? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. There's a profound difference between inspired action and ego-driven action. Inspired action flows from a place of connection to source. It feels light even when it's challenging. It feels like a yes in your body, not a should in your mind. Ego-driven action, on the other hand, comes from fear, from control, from a belief that if you don't force it to happen, it won't happen. And here's the irony. Ego-driven action, no matter how much effort you put in, will always hit a ceiling. It will always be limited by what your conditioned mind believes is possible. But inspired action can part the Red Sea. Robert and I talked for a long time that evening. I asked him to try something different. Instead of spending his meditation time visualizing his body healing, instead of affirming health over and over like he was trying to convince himself or God, I asked him to simply sit in silence and ask one question. What wants to emerge through me? Not, please heal me, but what wants to emerge? Because you see, when we're fixated on a specific outcome, even healing, even something we desperately need, we're still operating from ego. We're still saying, I know what should happen, and my job is to make it happen. But when we open ourselves to what wants to emerge, we're saying something radically different. We're saying, I trust that there is a divine intelligence at work here, and I'm willing to be surprised by how it unfolds. 3 months later, Robert wrote to me. He said that in the beginning, sitting with that question felt frustrating, even pointless. His mind would race with worry about his symptoms, about his future, about whether he was wasting precious time. But he kept showing up to that question every morning. And gradually, something began to shift. He noticed that on certain days, he would feel a strong intuition to call an old friend, or to try a particular food he'd been avoiding, or to spend time in nature instead of at another doctor's appointment. These weren't dramatic, lightning bolt moments. They were quiet nudges. And because he'd practiced letting go of his agenda, because he'd created space for something beyond his ego to guide him, he followed them. The remarkable thing, and I want you to really hear this, is that Robert's healing didn't happen the way he thought it would. His condition didn't suddenly reverse overnight in some medically inexplicable miracle. Instead, over the course of about 18 months, a series of seemingly unrelated events unfolded. That old friend he called mentioned a specialist who was doing cutting-edge work that his original doctors hadn't known about. That dietary change reduced inflammation in ways that created new possibilities for treatment. That time in nature shifted his nervous system out of chronic stress, which every piece of research shows impacts healing. And yes, there were changes that medical science couldn't fully explain. But here's what matters most. Robert stopped identifying as a sick person fighting against his body. He started experiencing himself as an expression of infinite intelligence that was reorganizing itself toward wholeness. And in that shift of perception, in that letting go of who he thought he was and what he thought was possible, the impossible became his lived reality. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, that's beautiful, Wayne, but I need to pay my rent next week. I can't just trust the universe and hope money appears. And I understand that. I've been there. There was a time in my life when I had 4 children, a wife, a mortgage, and I decided to leave a tenured position at a university to pursue something that made absolutely no logical sense, writing and speaking about ideas that most people thought were just New Age nonsense. My colleagues thought I'd lost my mind. My family was worried. And honestly, there were nights when I wondered if they were right. But here's what I learned, and it's something I want to impress upon you with everything in me. When you step out in faith, you're not ignoring practical reality. You're accessing a larger reality. You're not denying that rent is due, or that you need to eat, or that there are real, tangible responsibilities in the physical world. You're recognizing that there is an intelligence in this universe that has been orchestrating the movement of galaxies for billions of years, and that same intelligence is available to you when you align with it. The key word there is align, not beg, not bargain, not prove yourself worthy. Align. What does alignment look like practically? It means you do what's in front of you to do, but you do it from a different place inside. You send out the resumes, you make the phone calls, you take the medications, you have the difficult conversations, but you do them without the energy of desperation clinging to them. You do them as offerings, not demands. You do them while remaining open to outcomes you haven't imagined. Because here's a truth that took me years to fully embody. The universe is conspiring for your highest good, but your highest good might not look like what your ego thinks it should look like. Let me tell you about a woman I met, let's call her Sarah, who was facing foreclosure on her home. She came to me panicked, asking how she could manifest the exact amount of money she needed by the deadline, and I said something that initially made her angry. I said, "What if losing your house is exactly what needs to happen for you to find the life you're meant to live?" She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. She said, "Are you telling me to just give up? To not even try?" And I said, "No, I'm telling you to expand your definition of what's possible. You're so fixated on saving this one house that you've closed yourself off to the 1,000 other ways your life could unfold beautifully." The truth is, Sarah did lose that house. And for a while, it was devastating. She had to move in with her sister. She had to downsize radically. But in that process, in the letting go that she didn't choose but had to surrender to, something remarkable happened. Living with her sister reconnected her to family relationships that had been strained. The forced simplification showed her how much energy she'd been pouring into maintaining a lifestyle that wasn't even making her happy. And within a year, she'd started a business that had been a dream for decades, but that she'd always said she didn't have time or resources to pursue. 2 years later, she owned a home again, but more than that, she owned her life in a way she never had before. Now, I'm not suggesting that everyone needs to lose their home to find themselves. That's not the point. The point is that when we step out in faith, we're not stepping toward a specific outcome that our ego has decided is the only acceptable result. We're stepping into a relationship with life itself, with the creative intelligence that some call God, some call Source, some call the Tao, some call the universe. And that intelligence is always guiding us toward our highest unfoldment, even when the path looks nothing like what we planned. So how do you actually do this? How do you step out in faith when everything in your conditioning is screaming at you to control, to force, to make it happen? Let me offer you something practical, something you can begin today. Every morning, before you get caught up in the momentum of your day, sit quietly for even just 10 minutes. And instead of making it a time of asking or wishing or visualizing specific outcomes, make it a time of listening. Place your hand on your heart and ask, what wants to express through me today? What is mine to do? And then, this is crucial, wait. Don't fill the silence with your agenda. Don't jump immediately into action. Wait until you feel something. It might be subtle. It might be a feeling of yes or no in your body. It might be an image, a memory, a sudden thought about calling someone or going somewhere. These are not random. These are the whispers of your highest self, of that infinite intelligence that knows the path you cannot see. And then, when you do act, practice what I call relaxed intention. You move forward, yes. You take the steps, yes. But you hold them lightly. You don't grip. You don't clench. You don't panic when things don't unfold according to your timeline or your plan. You stay open. You stay curious. You ask, what is this teaching me? What is this revealing to me? How is this, even if it looks like a detour or a setback, actually serving my highest good? I need to address something here because I know there are people listening who've been hurt by versions of this teaching that were shallow or cruel. You've been told that if you just believed hard enough, if you just had enough faith, if you just did the technique correctly, then you would get what you want. And when you didn't get it, you were told it was your fault, that you didn't believe enough, that you had too much doubt, that you sabotaged yourself. And I want to say clearly, that is ego, dressed up in spiritual clothing. That is the wounded self trying to control outcomes by making you responsible for things that are beyond your control. Real faith doesn't blame you when things don't unfold the way you hoped. Real faith holds you with compassion and says, something bigger than what you can see right now is at work. Trust the process even when you can't see the outcome. There's a story I love from ancient China about a farmer whose horse ran away. His neighbor said, "What terrible luck!" And the farmer said, "Maybe." The next day, the horse returned with several wild horses, and the neighbors said, "What wonderful luck!" And the farmer said, "Maybe." Then the farmer's son tried to ride one of the wild horses and broke his leg, and the neighbor said, "What terrible luck." And the farmer said, "Maybe." Then the army came through conscripting young men for war, but they didn't take the farmer's son because of his broken leg. You see where this is going? The farmer had learned something that most of us resist with every fiber of our being. We don't actually know what's good or bad. We don't have the perspective to judge whether what's happening right now is a blessing or a curse because we can't see how the story unfolds. Stepping out in faith means being willing to be the farmer. It means saying maybe when your ego wants to label everything as disaster or triumph. It means staying present with what is while remaining open to what could be. It means recognizing that your job is not to figure out how the impossible becomes possible. Your job is to show up, to be available, to stay aligned with the highest truth you know, and to trust that the how will reveal itself in perfect timing. I've lived long enough now, and I hope you'll forgive an old man for saying this, to see the pattern over and over. The things I thought I wanted, the things I prayed for and demanded and tried to force into being, often the universe had a better idea. Often what I thought was the answer was actually keeping me from something far more beautiful. And the things I thought were disasters, the losses and failures and closed doors, almost always turned out to be redirections towards something I couldn't have imagined, but that was exactly what my soul needed. So when I talk about believing God for the impossible, I'm not talking about using God like a cosmic vending machine where you put in enough faith and get out the result you want. I'm talking about something much more profound and much more challenging. I'm talking about trusting that you are not separate from the creative intelligence of the universe. That the same power that grows an oak tree from an acorn, that heals a cut on your skin without you having to think about it, that orchestrates the symphony of your body's trillions of cells functioning in harmony every moment, that same power is available to you when you stop trying to control it and start collaborating with it. The impossible is only impossible from the perspective of ego, from the limited viewpoint that says, this is all there is. These are the only options. I can only work with what I can see and measure and understand. But you are not just ego. You are so much more than that scared, controlling part of you that's trying to manage life from a place of fear. You are an expression of infinite creativity. You are, as the mystics have said for millennia, the universe becoming conscious of itself. And when you live from that truth, when you step out in faith from that knowing, the impossible doesn't just become possible. It becomes your natural state of being. Let me give you one more practice, and then I'll leave you with a question to sit with. Tonight, before you go to sleep, review your day, not from the perspective of what went right or wrong, but from the perspective of what was trying to emerge. Ask yourself, where did I feel aligned today? Where did I feel that sense of flow, even for a moment? And then ask, where did I resist? Where did I grip? Where did I try to force something instead of allowing it? Don't judge yourself for the answers. This isn't about self-criticism. It's about becoming aware. Because the more aware you become of when you're operating from ego versus when you're operating from source, the more you can consciously choose alignment. And choice by choice, day by day, you rewire your entire relationship with life. Here's the question I want to leave you with, and I invite you to let it live in you. Not as something to answer quickly, but as something to marinate in. What would your life look like if you truly trusted that you are supported by an infinite intelligence that loves you and wants the highest good for you? Not trusted intellectually, not as a nice idea, but trusted so deeply that it changed how you move through every moment of your day. What would you do differently? What would you let go of? What impossible dream would you finally allow yourself to step toward? You don't have to have the answer right now. You don't have to figure it all out. All you have to do is be willing to ask the question and then stay open to what emerges. Because I promise you this, when you change the way you look at the impossible changes. It stops being this big, scary, unreachable thing out there and starts being an invitation into a larger version of yourself that's been waiting patiently for you to let go and let it emerge. You are not here to live a small, manageable life that your ego can control. You're here to participate in the grand, mysterious, infinitely creative unfolding of existence. And that, my friend, requires faith. Not faith that you can make things happen, but faith that when you align yourself with Source, with love, with the highest truth you know, the impossible becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Step out. The net will appear. It always does.